Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Industrial Real Estate Show. I'm pleased to be joined by sort of an internet celebrity. George, is that a fair way of describing you these days?
Oh boy, I've heard that before, but that still hasn't completely sunk in.
So, for those that don't recognize George, you did a video, was it earlier this year, where you talked about a theoretical scenario on how you stole a house. And I have to preface it by saying theoretical because I believe it got taken down by TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, because they thought you were actually promoting criminal activity. What's the story? What's the story behind that video?
Yeah. So what happened was it was Super Bowl Sunday earlier this year, and I uploaded the video called "I Stole a House," and it had the hook of "I stole a house in Portland, Oregon, and totally got away with it." And here's how I did it. And it basically walks through the squatter scam of how somebody can go and occupy a residential property and claim it as their own, fool the police, and essentially have a free place to live for anywhere from a couple months to a couple years. And it got taken down off of TikTok after like a half an hour, but not before my notifications had completely blown up. Same with on Meta, but TikTok took it down basically immediately. Meta had it up for a few days, took it down, put it back up, took it down again. But one place where it stayed consistent was on X, and on X it went super viral. The problem was that on X, it wasn't linked back to my profile. Somebody had downloaded it from TikTok and then posted it onto their Twitter, onto their X, and it made the rounds on what I kind of refer to as like right wing Twitter. So not super far right, but pretty Republican. And so I'm more middle of the road politically. I didn't really mind all that much, but the problem was a lot of people thought that it was me actually doing it because it wasn't linked back to my profile. It said, "Hey, I'm George. I'm a real estate investor. I've been in the game 20 years." And instead, they just thought I was perpetrating the crime. So I started like getting death threats, and like people were like contacting me. I'm like, "Yo, look at my profile. I'm not the guy who's stealing a house." But maybe that's why it got so much engagement. But like it changed everything. Tens of millions of views. It went on Dr. Phil, Bigger Pockets, News Nation. They talked about me on Fox News and on Joe Rogan. And so I've been on this little side quest since then, about educating people about squatters and deed fraud and just how devastating it can be for you as a property owner.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. And first, congrats on all of that. I'm sure that was a life-changing video, for the better for the most part. But I've
Oh
been a
yeah.
victim of a little bit of trolling on X for when I've posted some somewhat controversial things, and I can appreciate how much you must have gotten, because that was a polarizing topic where people probably love to jump on it saying here's what's actually happening, and then people probably thought if you were actually the one doing that and you were saying how to do it, you must have gotten so much hate.
Oh yeah, man. Like anybody that I've ever met was sending me messages and DMs and emails saying like, "Hey, I saw your video. That's crazy. Did you actually do that? Did that really happen?" And I'm like, "Dude, give me a break. Come on." And there's all sorts of little tips in the video that like I didn't actually do it. Like there's a screenshot of me searching the internet, and the previous search was how to be a piece of shit. And so then I'm wearing a GoBundance hat the whole time, which is an organization you can only join with a certain net worth and income requirement. And so, yeah, there's a lot of tips on there that like I'm not really the guy stealing a house, but I'm moreover just it's a satirical commentary on it. But it really flew over a lot of people's heads, more than I would have guessed. But I want to say it was a very vocal minority if I had to take a stab at it.
Yeah, that's usually the case. Most people, I think, can understand internet humor and satire, and they get it. But there's also the very few that take everything at face value, and anytime they have an opportunity to overreact, they jump on it. So I could imagine seeing some of those, but most of it was probably pretty positive. What was it like being on Dr. Phil?
I really liked it. He's a solid guy, and he has a really streamlined operation, a great staff. And I'd never done hair and makeup before, but they dressed me up. They did my hair, they did my makeup, and I'm like, wow, I look great. This must be what it's like to, I don't know, be a celebrity or be a girl. Just being done up like that really felt great. And then I got a chance to hang out with him a little bit, and he's a real solid guy. And my appearance went well. I thought, I can sometimes fumble over my words when I feel under pressure, but the word was that I was well spoken and that it went well. And I had a big bar full of people with me when we had the watch party, and so it was a great experience overall. And I would totally go back. I would do it again.
Very cool. Well, I do want to jump into a couple things. I think the one topic that'll be of most relevance to the audience listening will be touching on deed or title fraud and what people can do, because
Yeah.
that's applicable for all types of real estate, and industrial being one of them. But I still even want to
Hmm.
just hear a little bit on the squatter side, because I'm also guessing that everybody that is tuned into this owns a home or is considering owning a home at some point. So this will still be relevant to them on that side. And I just want to hear from you how. So that video breaks down how easy it is to steal a house hypothetically.
Hmm.
Do you have scenarios, or have you heard of actual cases where people have gone in and done this and successfully?
Then you broke up there for a second, Chad, like where they've gone and actually done this successfully in a house. Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. I was actually looking around for someone who's done it in an industrial property, and there's nowhere near as many cases as in houses because people are typically looking for a place to live. But in commercial properties, it definitely does happen. But with residential properties, it's happening all over the country, all over the world for that matter. It actually got written up in like a Romanian newspaper after the story broke, or maybe it was Norwegian. I can't remember. But worldwide, it actually is a problem because it's anywhere that has landlord tenant law. And the loophole that's being exploited is that when you have landlord tenant law, you have somebody with a contractual right to occupy a property. And even if you say, hey, you need to get the heck out of here, you're not allowed to kick them out by law because, they have the lawful right to occupy it, and it's protected by landlord tenant law. And so if you've got a guy who's like, unbeknownst to the owner, moved in all his stuff, maybe a few buddies, making it really look plausible that he does have the right to be there, put the utility in his name. Then when the cop shows up with the owner saying, hey, get this guy out of here. He's not supposed to be here. The guy says, well, I'm sorry, officer, but I have a lease right here. I'm paying the utilities. As you can see, I've moved my stuff. I've lived here for months. I'm not sure what the owner's on about, but like I'm the guy who should be here. I live here. And pretty much almost anywhere in the world, the shirt on your back is presumed to be your own unless somebody can prove beyond a reasonable doubt right there on the spot that it's not that shirt doesn't belong to you. And the same goes with a house, maybe even moreover, because as they say, possession is 9/10 of the law. And if you're in possession of your shirt, in possession of a house, and you've got a cop that's got a he said, she said situation on their hands, they've got to say, hey man, I'm not going to put my neck on the line to pull this guy out of the house because there's a chance that he actually does have a legitimate claim to be there. And sorry, but you guys are going to have to go sort this out in court. So that's what happens, and that's basically how the scam is being perpetrated on a high level.
That is so scary to think about, that it's that easy to do. What happens in that case then? So I'm guessing you got to hire a lawyer, you try to go to court, you've got to convince the court, and how long this takes, and the costs involved. What is the outcome on this?
So those are the conventional routes that you just described. And after I went viral, contacted by dozens, maybe even hundreds of people that had their own squatter stories and real estate fraud stories. And that's actually how I learned about deed fraud, which we'll get into in a minute. But they said, hey, you won't believe what happened to my grandma with her squatter, or what happened to my partner with his squatter, or what happened to me with a squatter that, installed a stripper pole, or like, I had a snake breeding factory in there. Like, so I'm like, let's talk about it. Let's hear about this. So I did phone calls with dozens and dozens of people and just heard all their stories. And I'm like, so, okay, that's how it happened. That's really terrible. That sounds like terrible emotional distress. How'd you get rid of them? And most people went the conventional route, but then other people didn't go the conventional route. They did all manner of things, and they'd always preface it with like, well, can we speak off the record here? I'm like, we sure as heck can. And so they explored a lot of what I get into in the Squatter Defender course at squatterdefender.com, if anybody wants to take a look, of the unconventional methods. And I can't endorse any of the unconventional methods, except for maybe one or two, but they include things like filling the house with rats, dumping snakes down the chimney,
Wow.
setting up like booby traps. Some of these I really like say, okay, hey, please don't do this, like pulling your squatter out like at gunpoint. That's probably not going to work out great every time in your favor. And there's another one that I didn't talk to the guy, but I heard about. He'd set up a series of traps, like bear traps. And when you intentionally injure, or in some cases, unfortunately, unalive your squatter, a lot of times there's liability at stake. So There are some unconventional methods that people employed that worked really well that didn't take the months and months and months that it takes, or years for that matter, to get a squatter out the conventional way.
Yeah, it's interesting because I saw a video. I think it was an interview that you did on another podcast, and one of the comments was, if somebody squats on my land, they'll be buried on my land. And it's that type of tough guy rhetoric where I think, you got a guy that's
Yeah.
thinks he's really tough, and he's like, oh wow, this guy's gonna squat on my land. Well, I'm just gonna go in and I'm gonna fight him, or whatever bravado these guys think that they can do to just
Yeah.
talk them off. And I think that's actually a terrible idea, because if anything goes wrong, like what happens if you actually hurt the guy or killed the guy because you got into a fist fight and you actually injured him? Like now all of a sudden you're looking past just issues with your house. Now you're looking at potential criminal charges. You're looking at just the ramifications
Yeah.
of actually
And
hurting somebody, or so I think that's a terrible idea. But I agree with you that there has to be somewhere in the middle between actually killing somebody and uh, going the legal route. Which, how long does that take? If you wanted to hire a lawyer, go through the whole
oh
process,
yeah.
is that 6 months, a year, 2 years? How long does that take?
You're looking at like a minimum of some places to just file an eviction and get a guy out. It's like, you can get him out in like 6 or 8 weeks or something. It's really short. But more often than not, it's a whole lot longer. And I promise you, during that 6 or 8 weeks, they will have completely trashed your place. But in a lot of places, it takes like 9 months, 12 months. I've heard about multiple year battles where they just pull every single trick in the book. They get a taxpayer funded lawyer to go and battle on their half and go after the landlord for having some sort of clause missing from his lease or something like that. So yeah, going the conventional route is maddening. And just like you said, Chad, like there is a lot of bravado out there of, people saying that they would, bury the person on the land and whatnot. The thing is, that actually has happened. People have actually followed through with that. And a lot of them are in jail right now. I've read about and heard about many cases where somebody was hurt, somebody was killed, and it's not always water. Keep in mind that these are people that are desperate enough to squat and commit this crime willfully. They're desperate enough to do a lot of things, and up to and including hurting or killing anybody who wants to disrupt them. So when I say like, hey, find out more about your squatter and everything, and get as much intel as you can, use your instincts, because if you're up against somebody who's crazy, especially if you're upping the ante, if you're raising the stakes by like bringing a firearm or a weapon or raising your voice, anything like that, then you're taking a risk. And I guarantee it, if you are the property owner, you have much more to lose than the squatter.
Yeah, I remember hearing that when I was younger, is never fight someone that has less to lose than you do, because even if you win, there's repercussions on the other end. So I think that is like the best advice that I would give to anybody is don't go the route of being the tough guy and thinking you can just talk them out of it and perhaps show up with a weapon and just think that you can force your way into this. I think that's just a decision that it could work out, but there's all the downside risk of doing something like that is just too much in my mind. So tell me about the course then. Is that something that someone should do proactively, or is that a course that if you have a squatter move in, here's your playbook on how to deal with it?
I always advocate for people to get educated beforehand. So Squatter Defender it's an online course. You can finish it in an afternoon. It's extremely condensed into a few hours of instruction, but squatter prevention, detection, and ejection. And I really encourage people to do it on the front end of things, because if you own any residential property, then you're at risk of having a squatter. And if you end up getting one, trust me, you are on your own. Your lawyer, the government, fellow investors, nobody really knows exactly the best way to deal with any one particular squatter situation, because they're all a little bit different. But the proactive approach of being educated beforehand will, as they say, Chad, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so if you're in any danger of having a residential squatter, then, or a commercial for that matter, Gordon Ramsay's restaurant got squatted in recently. So
Wow.
it could happen to anyone. It's $199 for the course, and I'm going to give a promo code later in the show for 20% off. But yeah, it's definitely good to be proactive rather than reactive. But if you got one, yeah, you should call me up and you should listen to the course.
Yeah, absolutely. And it has happened in industrial as well. Although I don't think it's the same as them trying to set up and live there. But especially in winter climates, like I'm in, it's not uncommon for homeless people to break into a warehouse just to have, like you said, they're desperate. If they have nothing else to do, and there's a warehouse in an industrial park where there's not a lot of activity, and especially if it's a warehouse that hasn't been occupied in a long time and it's easy to get in, well, now at least you have shelter. So I can sympathize with
Yeah.
people that are in those conditions. If you're freezing cold, you got to do what you can to survive. But that is a problem too, where I've walked in on buildings where there was homeless people inside, and for the
Oh
most
yeah.
part, they've been very good to just leave, because I think they understand it as well. But that's still an issue. And what happens if they did say, no, we're not leaving? Now all of a sudden you do have a problem on your hands. So I think,
You do
although
have a
we're
problem.
yeah, it's a big problem. So although we're talking on the residential side specifically, I think this is an issue. Like you said, Gordon Ramsay had his restaurant squatted on. I think it is possible to have that in any type of property, really. So I think that course is worth looking into. I heard you on another interview say one tip, which I think is very helpful, and that's just to have an alarm. So can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think that is probably one of the best tips that everybody can do right now, especially if you have a vacant property, is to have an alarm on there.
Totally, yeah. And there's a perception that having an alarm system is going to be extremely costly and be a hassle. You have to call a company and da, da, da. The reality is, if you call up Simply Safe or you just order online, I have no affiliation with them or anything, but I do offer a 50% off coupon with the Squatter Defender course. And that's on a package that gets you a camera, a siren that'll go off, and a keypad, and then a motion sensor. That's really all you need for any property, industrial, residential, commercial. And it's all self-install. You just plug it into the wall. And I think all in with the 50% off coupon, it's like it's under $100. It's portable. You can take it anywhere, and you can have it call the cops if it gets set off. But all you really need is just the notification on your phone. It goes off and says, "Hey Chad, you got some motion here down at your warehouse, down at your rental property, whatever it is." You pull up the camera and you see Frankie the Stealer trying to get in there, and he's picked the lock. He's in there. So then you've got some video evidence, and I have sent videos of evidence to police officers before, and they'll say like, "Okay, you got a video? Let's see it. Send it to this number." And they'll be like, "Okay, yep, that works. Yeah, that guy's doing something wrong." And they go down and they fix it. That is a very, very far cry from a guy who's been in there for like days, weeks, months, or longer. And you say like, "Okay, get rid of this guy," when he's obviously very firmly established. So homeless or otherwise, when you've got a guy who's been in there for a while, it's a very different scenario than knowing immediately. And so that's a big component of the squatter prevention part of the course. So there's having an alarm, knowing what to do if you do have somebody that comes into your property, and then there's other ways to kind of scare them away to begin with. But just like you said, man, that's a really big component, and it's really not expensive, or it's not a hassle to implement.
Yeah, well said. I'd recommend people check out your website and look at that course. I'll look into it as well, because I have some rental property, and that is a concern for sure that does happen. So I recommend people check it out. Let's move over to deed or title fraud, though, because you mentioned you came across this probably after you started looking into squatter rights and everything that goes with that. What did you discover
Mhm.
with deed and
Mhm.
title fraud? Why is it an issue?
So I'd never even heard of deed fraud before all this stuff came down with my viral video. But essentially, what it is it's forging a deed into somebody who the property doesn't belong to. So, say you own your property in Ad LLC, and either somebody impersonates you with a fake ID they got off the dark web, or what they're doing these days is they're stealing an identity, getting what they call fulls, which is like a social security number, an address, a bank account, like all the stuff to be somebody else, but they got their mug on there. And so what they'll do is they'll transfer the title by forging the deed, and forging a deed pretty much anywhere is so easy. It's just a notary stamp, grantor, grantee, signatures, and it's not like they're checking signatures against a database or anything like that. They're just getting this paperwork down at the recorder's office, and they're recording it. So people are transferring deeds into the names of these stolen identities, and then they find like a wholesaler or an end buyer, and they say, "Hey, I just picked up this property from Chad for $500,000. In market value is like 750. So I'll sell it to you for 525." And any end buyers being like, "Okay, I'm getting a great deal on this." And yeah, they're going to buy it. Yeah, and they'll open up title and get title insurance and everything. And the title company, they've got a perfect match. They've got a matching social. They're good to go. And this guy wants to get this property because he's getting a great price on it. And these properties that are being targeted are specifically ones that are very high equity and also ones that don't have a mortgage, because if there's a mortgage on there, then you just don't get as much money back from it from the sale. But they'll sell the property to the end buyer and the wholesaler, and they pocket that equity. It goes into that ill-begotten bank account, and from there they ship it to China or buy crypto with it or whatever. But the owner, Chad LLC, when that title is transferred, you don't know about it for weeks or months or even longer, because nobody goes online and checks their title habitually. It's really not a thing. And so I started a company called Title Fraud Defender that just does that exact thing. It just monitors every single day to make sure that your title is remaining in your name. And if it changes, then we contact you and say, hey, did you sell this place? Because if you didn't, we got to do some stuff to make sure your equity doesn't get stolen. And instead of paying, the thousands that you pay for the rare type of title insurance policy that protects against this, that keeps your equity safe, it costs like as much as a cup of coffee. It's like $2 to $5 per month to monitor it, to make sure that your equity doesn't get stolen.
That is also wild. Like that to me is just as crazy as the squatter rights, that it's that easy to do. What happens in that case? So I own a property, someone comes and does this elaborate plan, they sell off the property, so now someone else technically owns it. What is the process of trying to get ownership of the deed back?
So you have to do what's called an action to quiet title. And so chain of title, even if it's fraudulently transferred, you can't just like call up the recorder's office and say like, hey, this is fraudulent. You gotta switch it back. They don't do that. Chain of title is like very sacred. And so they can't do it unless the court tells them to. So you got to lawyer up and you got to have a lawsuit as an action to quiet title. And it can be accomplished from anywhere from like a few grand up to like tens of thousands of dollars and months and years to fix the whole thing. So that's to get you back on title. But getting your equity, that's a whole different thing, because even if you do get your title back, which is a whole lot easier to do on the front end. So say you've got Title Fraud Defender and you find out about it, you can't keep them from switching it out of your name. But if you find out about it real quick, it's pretty lickety split. You can switch it back pretty easily. It's really your equity that's really at stake. But then when you call up your title company and you say, hey, I've been title frauded. What's up with my title insurance? They're going to tell you like, okay, well, let's see. You've got an Alta owner's policy, which unfortunately does not protect against fraud and impersonation after the policy date. There is an Alta policy that does, but it's extremely rare and much more expensive. So most people don't get it.
So I think it's very similar to the squatter rights then, is if you're on top of it, it's just easier to rectify the problem and get ahead of it. So that's where your software solution comes into hand. What happens though, if someone does come in, I own that house for 500 grand and it, sorry, I just got a notification. I got to pop off here. So own the property for 500 grand and I don't own any debt on it. So it's, they have successfully switched the title. The seller being the guy that title frauded me, takes that 500 grand in profit, maybe sells it for 525, like you said. So what does happen? Like, are you just out that money? Or if you don't have that rider in your title insurance policy, what happens?
You are out that money. And that's the short story. You don't get it back. But there is but then there's been scenarios where I've heard that people can get their money back if the end buyer has a policy that will reimburse, but they're going to reimburse the end buyer, not you. And so so if you've like, there's a nightmare scenario which has actually happened several times. Florida land in particular is particularly susceptible to this type of fraud, where people have transferred the title to some land to somebody, and then somebody has built on it. And so they'll build like a really nice house on it. And then the guy will come back who's been frauded and say like, hey, this is my land. And I'll be like, well, sorry, but I just spent a bunch of money building on it. And so there's no one like prescribed scenario like, okay, this is how it goes or this is how it happens every time. But basically you have to unravel everything that's happened since you got title frauded. And if it results in you getting your equity back, then awesome. But it is definitely not a direct route because there's no deep pocket along the way that actually is obligated to pay you out directly. And so you end up having to like, go after the guy who is like the end buyer who is going to hopefully get reimbursed by his title insurance company, but it gets really long and convoluted. But in a lot of scenarios, yeah, you lose your equity and you're just completely out that money because there's nobody to pay you.
So what do you do? How do you prevent that? This seems like a nightmare scenario for everybody that this could happen to anybody. What do you do?
Yeah, no, the only thing you can do is try and prevent it from happening in the first place. If it's already happened to you, then lawyer up and cross your fingers.
Hmm.
But the only thing you can do is so there's other people that are doing the same thing I am at Title Fraud Defender. There's Home Title Lock, which you may have seen commercials on, especially if you consume conservative conservative media. They're $20 a month, and I'm between 2 to 5, depending on how many properties you put in there. So I'm kind of going for like investors, people that have portfolios and that don't want to pay $200 a month to protect their 20 units or their 10 units of property. And with me, they can do it for like, 25% of that or something. So yeah, just get a subscription to Title Fraud Defender, monitor your titles, make sure you're not getting stolen, because it's one of those things where like 5 years ago, there was like a couple thousand instances of it. Then there was 4,000, then there's 8,000. And there's no actual statistics on this stuff, but I've spoken with a couple of like the leading deed fraud lawyers in the country, and they estimate that somewhere around like 10,000 cases per year where people are doing this. And they're shooting from the hip, and they admit this. But as a percentage of like all the properties in the country, like the odds are not super duper high. So yeah, it's sort of like, it's a little bit like life insurance. Chances are, Chad, you're not going to get run over by a train on your way to get your coffee later this afternoon. But if it does happen, you're going to want to plan, number one. And if you can have an alert on you that says there's a train coming, Chad's about to run you over, then yeah, you're going to be thankful that you had that.
Yeah, that's a good analogy on that, and I hope I don't get run over by a train. For the record, and if this interview doesn't go on, then that was the case. Otherwise, we'll be putting this on
Yes,
next week.
exactly.
I think I heard in another interview that you did that you're an investor yourself. So you're speaking about this from having experience in the field.
Yes, sir.
Did I hear also that you're working on in an industrial building?
I am, yeah. So I'm building some flex space in a small town called Stanfield, Oregon. It's one of those places where all the housing around it has gotten really expensive, and people are moving there because they can still have affordable housing and a nice place to live. And so a lot of those people are those plumbers and electricians and candle makers and flower shop arrangers that need like 1,000 to 2,000 square feet of flex space that have moved beyond their garage, and I'm planning to cater to that market. It's a smaller project. It's actually my first industrial development. I've been developing single family and multifamily for a while, but actually, thanks in a pretty big part to your podcast, Chad, I've got to give you a shout out. I've just gotten more and more into the industrial space and decided to pull the trigger, bought some dirt, and now I'm in the process of doing that. So yeah, let me publicly thank you for that, because you were an influence in this decision.
No, that's awesome to hear. We should do a second interview at some point down the road, and I'd love to dive into that project that you're doing a little bit more, and just hear about it and the process you did and how you decided to size the bays and how you're doing them. I think that'd be a fascinating
Yeah,
discussion for a
I would
second
totally do
episode
that.
too. Very cool. You mentioned
Heck
promo
yeah,
code.
man. I would totally do that.
Oh, absolutely, we'll do that. How far along down the road are you on it? Are you planning, or have you gone vertical yet?
Still in the planning stage. I've so actually the whole thing got kind of sidetracked by this little side quest I'm on with squatting and deep fraud. I picked up the land last spring and had plans made and everything, and started getting everything ordered. But then started dragging my feet because this whole thing happened to me. But yeah, it's gonna go up in 25. So I'd say we're probably several months from being completed. But yeah, once we get closer, then I will definitely give you a heads up.
Yeah, that would be a fun episode to dive into that one further. But in the meantime, you mentioned you've got a discount code if people want to check out this course or the Title Defender.
Yeah. So squatterdefender.com. It's got a course on squatting for $199 and 20% off coupon for entering Chad's promo code, which is industrial. So put in the promo code industrial, get 20% off the course, and then titlefrauddefender.com. That's your title fraud software. And it's not even really software that doesn't live on your computer. You basically just enter your name, your property info, you look it up, and boom, you're protected. And then that has that same 20% off coupon, industrial. And that, depending on how many properties you put in there, it's anywhere from $2 to $5 per month per property. And that keeps you from that nightmare scenario that we were talking about before. And especially if you're an industrial property owner and you got a lot of equity in your properties, and because they tend to not make industrial properties very small, you probably got a good chunk of equity if you're listening to this podcast. Yeah, protect it. Go to Title Fraud Defender, use the promo code industrial, and protect yourself. Don't get defrauded.
It seems like such a small cost to have that peace of mind that it is being checked all the time. So yeah, I'd encourage people to go and check that out. And George, wanted to thank you for jumping on the call and providing all that information and value. That was awesome. Look forward to doing part 2 when we talk about your flex property.
Awesome, man. I'll look forward to that.
Cool. Well, thanks, George. Really do appreciate it. And we'll be in touch.
Awesome. Thanks, Chad.
Okay. Thanks, George. Yeah, I'm just going to stop it here. But just give me 1 second. Stop. We actually had to cut that clip.